Welcome to the podcast. I actually wanted to start out by calling out to the audience and ask what you guys wanted to hear from us. We're still trying to figure out the scope of this podcast, and we know that we're interested in interviewing nomads, adventurers, backcountry nomads. But it seems like it's an open question to both Brian and I can't wait to actually have a conversation with Barron as to what is it that we're actually trying to accomplish with this, with this podcasting format. And if you just let me go a little bit longer, Brian, I'm definitely interested in hearing your thoughts. But I have one idea, one concept that I'd throw out to you, and I'm really interested in hearing your thoughts about. So, I mean, maybe it's easier to start by saying what we're not trying to do. And I think one of the guys that's been really successful with podcasts, in addition to Joe Rogan, which you and I have really talked about, admiring his long form. But I think Tim Ferriss has also done a really interesting job with his podcast, and I point out his podcast as something. I don't think we're trying to do that. And, he targets the ultra performers and teases out their, ultra tactics as far as, what those leaders are doing and how they're awesome. Mm-hmm. And I totally love his shit, but at the same time, I feel like we're targeting a different kind of discussion. And it almost seems like we're engaging the common person who's seeking an uncommon life. And, maybe that person has made it, but maybe they haven't. And I'm definitely curious about the elite and how they do their thing, but I'm also equally curious about those who are just trying to piece it together. And, they're in the midst of their obstacles, heeding their siren's call to do something unconventional, and they're unsure of that way, but they're feeling their way through the process. So that's a really general thought on my part as to what we're trying to do here. But I'm interested in your thoughts on that trajectory.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to go, because if you look at these people that are wildly successful, whether it's with podcasting or whatever it may be, it's like, it's hard to realize that as being attainable for the common person, to say like, hey, today I'm just normal, but tomorrow I'm going to be a Tim Ferriss, or tomorrow I'm going to be a Joe Rogan. Well, the reality is you're not. And, unless you just have an incredible platform and kind of the stars align. So I think that bringing more of the common person's approach to this and talking about real life problems like we have been doing, the picture that's painted online on Instagram, and especially in my case, I only put up the positive stuff. I don't put up the negatives. I did get into a little bit about how my back has been bothering me, but 9 times out of 10, it's all this sunny, feel good vibes and all that stuff. But that's not the whole picture. The whole picture is that there is problems, and there are challenges that come up with this. The living like this. And I think that what we've done is that we have kind of opened up the discussion for the common person to understand. Hey, just a heads up, I'm getting a little bit of feedback from your breathing.
From my breathing? Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
yeah, I guess I'm a mouth breather.
You're Neanderthal.
Yeah. It wouldn't be the first time that someone called me out for that.
Well, and just let the audience know that we're trying a new deal here. I'm in Kansas. Craig is in Gunnison, and we're doing this over the internet. We're recording the call over the internet. So this is kind of new for us. So if the audio is not perfectly spot on, just bear with us, and we'll get it all dialed in. But I think you're right. Having a podcast that talks about real life issues, but also blended in with like, hey, here's what we've done to help combat that, and this is why we live the way that we do. I think that reaches a lot more people and they can relate to that, as opposed to when you have somebody on who is maybe a movie star or like at the top of their game of whatever they do. Well, that's the cream of the crop, and of course you want to hear from those people, but it might not be as relatable as it will be as our stories or our conversations. So I think that's a good way to go, and I've kind of been open to ideas. When I first started this up, I thought, well, and we were talking, and I thought, well, let's just interview a bunch of outdoor people and all that stuff. Well, it's gone in a different direction, and I think as long as we're flexible like that going forward, and then the audience can input whatever they'd like as far as emailing us and saying, "Hey, I'd like for you guys to talk about this." I think that's the best way to go, and just kind of make it more of a free flow. That's my
Right
take
on.
on it. So
Yeah, no, and that's great to hear. At least I think we're thinking about the same things. And again, the Tim Ferriss, the Joe Rogan, those guys are awesome in who they interview, and those people are amazing. But I got to be honest, like sometimes I listen to those things and I'm like, I feel like shit. Like
yeah, I feel like
I'm
a
a total
loser.
failure, yeah, I'm a total loser compared to these people. I'm never going to be able to do what they do.
Yeah,
And anyway, I think that there's a nice there's a nice niche that we can explore when it comes to the common person that's trying to claw their way to do something different.
mm-hmm.
But we're gonna do different things, and have different challenges than those elite performers. And I'm definitely interested in hearing what the audience might have. The thoughts on that process, and the types of persons and subjects and philosophies that they'd like to hear more about.
Yeah.
But onto the podcast, I think it's a perfect segue that you're in a challenging situation right now, and
Yeah.
and you had one vision as to how things were going to go,
Yeah.
and you're experiencing something totally different. So
Yeah.
let's just start out by what's going on with you, Brian? Where are you at, and what are you confronting?
Yeah, well, the biggest issue that I'm confronting is the fact that my lower back is completely wrecked. 4 years ago, it was kind of funny. Like 2 months before I got on the road in April of 2015, I ruptured my L5 disc in my back, and I hit the road in July 5th, 2015. So I had 2 months to heal, and the doctors actually told me that I did heal up, and that I would have lingering effects of sciatica and just like muscles that would spasm and they pull my vertebrae out of place, and so it makes it very uncomfortable. And the problem is it's at the base of my back, right where my spine goes into my hips, into my pelvis. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's like you couldn't get more core than that. And when it's at that base, when I start to feel out of sorts, or if my spine is really bothering me, it's crippling. I mean, I driving back to Kansas, I'm back here to take care of my folks' dogs while they go out of town, and I was gonna work on my truck a little bit and kind of switch out some gear for winter things. And driving back, I literally would have to stop about every 30 to 45 minutes. I could maybe go an hour, if I was really toughing it out, but I'd have to stop every 30 or 45 minutes and get out and stretch for 10 or 15 minutes just to be able to get back in my vehicle and go another 30 minutes. And so it made my trip twice as long to come back here. And I started thinking to myself, I'm like, I can't continue doing this in the state that I'm in. I have to figure out either a treatment plan for my back, or I'm going to have to change what sort of vehicle I have and maybe tone down the four-wheeling. Because the problem with four-wheeling is that when I'm back on those trails, lots of times, and you know the trails I go on, they're pretty aggressive. And when you're on those trails, your truck is going back and forth. It's from left to right and tipping back and forth. And so you're constantly moving, and your body, and so like when the truck tips to the left to the right and back to the left, well, I'm moving as well, and that aggravates this part on my spine that where I had the ruptured disc. And it feels like there are two other areas in my back now that are separate from that previous injury that are giving me problems as well. And so I'm back here. I'm going to figure out a treatment plan. I would like to do it to where I just do yoga and physical therapy, because when I do yoga and I do for example, like the pigeon pose, that really awesome stretch, that helps, but it only helps for about an hour, and then I'm right back to where I was before. And so I need to figure out a way that I can continue to travel full time and be in a vehicle. Maybe it's a vehicle with a little bit bigger space, maybe I go. I've always had a thing for the Toyota Chinooks. I think they're incredible. The 4x4 Chinooks, the kind of old school ones. And so, maybe what I do is I get my truck cleaned up and kind of squared away, and then put on the market, see what I could get for it, and then go get an older Chinook and redo it. That's kind of a thought that I've been kicking around for the past few days. But I just don't know. I know for sure that I'm getting out of trail work. I have to email the Forest Service and tell them that I can't do it anymore, just because it's not worth wrecking my back for the rest of my life. For one more season of helping public lands. I've done it for 3.5 years now, and I think other people can step up to the plate and help out in that regard. And so I'm looking now to transition into more of a full-time traveling, kind of more laid back, staying in certain areas for longer periods of time, and not moving every single day like I've done over the past 3.5 years while I've been on the road. And so another thing too is I'm going to spend a lot more time in the Gunnison area, and then also down in Lake City. I was at my grandma's 90th birthday party this past weekend, and I completely forgot about this. When I was young, my grandfather on my dad's side of the family, my grandfather Galleon, he loved going up to Lake City, and there's a lake out there called Lake San Cristobal. And this lake is really big. It's beautiful, and there's a campground right there. And my grandfather knew the owner really well, so he'd go up there with his RV for the summer and just kind of hang out. Well, my uncles, I've got, I think I've got five uncles and one. Yeah, I've got five uncles and one aunt, and four of the five uncles own a large construction company. And they, back in, gosh, I think it was back in like 1995 or 96. They bought 3 lots on Main Street there, which is Gunnison Avenue, and then 1 lot up above Lake San Cristobal. And I was talking to my uncle Chris, who's dude. If you ever get a chance to meet my family, they're hilarious. Like, my uncles are awesome,
Nice.
and my uncle Chris is just the coolest guy. He's so much fun to talk to. And so, I was talking to him at my grandma's birthday party, and he was like, "Hey, do you ever go to Lake City?" I'm like, "Yeah, I've driven through a couple times this past year, just because that's a beautiful area, and I also love Creed down there." And
Hmm.
and he said, we've got those lots out there, and we've had them forever. And he goes, for all we know, somebody could have built a house on it, and just be squatting for the last 20 years, and we don't even know. So I was like, oh, really? And he said, yeah. He said, if you'd be interested next year, he said, we've been wanting to put some places, maybe a cabin or two up there, and get some work done on them, but we can't find anybody in the local market to help us out, which is pretty common in the mountain towns. Typically in the summertime, if anybody does any general contracting work or building work, or in my case, when I was doing landscaping, you get so incredibly busy that you can't get to everyone. And so you just kind of have these core clients that and it's typically people that are in town. So out-of-towners get pushed to the kind of bottom of the list when it comes to any sort of work that needs to be performed for people. So Chris said to me, he goes, if you'd be interested in going up there next year, he's like, maybe we could figure out something. And he said also too, our lot that's above Lake San Cristobal, it has a well. They dug a well on it and got water. And he said, you can go up there, and he goes, you're welcome to stay there whenever you want. And I suggested to him, I said, well, if you guys want to put some cabins on there, I said, I could look after it for you. And I said, you make a fortune on VRBO, if you wanted to rent it out for the summer. I was like, spring, fall, and winter, you probably wouldn't have a whole lot of people renting it, so I could actually stay in it during that time and just make sure that they're maintained through the winter. Because wintertime, I feel like wintertime in the mountains is definitely when the cabins like that get the most wear and tear from the environment. And so I suggested to him, I said, well, why don't I come up, sometime while I'm home here for the next month or two, just depending on how long it takes to get my back squared away. So why don't I come up to Sterling, Kansas, and talk with you guys, and if we can figure out a plan, then next year let's get after it and see what we can do in those areas. I was like, I certainly wouldn't mind being in Lake City. It's a beautiful area, and it's an area to where the 4x4 passes around there, and just the terrain, it's in the San Juan mountain range, and it's just unreal. So,
Yeah.
That in conjunction with the place in Gunnison that you're at right now, and then my buddy John Farr, he's one of my college friends. His family's got a place down in Creed, which is that'd be kind of like a fun like 3-town area that I could just operate in, and where we both could operate in, and just kind of bounce back and forth. I like Gunnison for the fact that I've been in Buena Vista now, like home basing out of there for like 3 years. There's absolutely no women whatsoever. I mean, there's every girl there that's there is like either married or has a boyfriend. And so it's like I was just relegated to like hitting on the tourist girls in town, and you kind of that's very short term. But when I was in Gunnison, heck, that first night we were there at the pizza place watching the Denver Broncos Kansas City Chiefs game. That gal next to us was smoking hot, and I'm like, this is, I want to be in this area. I don't want to just be in an area where I'm just single all the time. I want to have some single girls that are hot and that I can possibly date and all that stuff. 'Cause I'm not getting any younger. And although I do enjoy being single and I love the bachelor life, I mean, everybody loves company and companionship and all that stuff. And I just don't feel like Buena Vista was the place that could offer that. It's just there's some really heavy influences on there that are very, very, very conservative, and I don't mean in a political sense. I just mean like, just people's belief system. It's really it's not my cup of tea, I think is the best way to put it. And so when I had the opportunity to make the break from Buena Vista this summer with the shady stuff that went down with my trails company and the partner that I had, I just looked at that as an opportunity to improve my situation and get out of the trail work because it was wrecking my back and wrecking my body, and focus on other stuff that I think would be more fun. And Lake City just sounds like it would be the cat's meow. It's a great place to get down into northern New Mexico. You can get over to southeast Utah and nothing flat, and get to the Four Corners area, and then drop into northern Arizona. So that's going to be my focus going forward. And my immediate focus in the short term is just making sure I get my health in order so that I can continue to truck camp full time. Because as it stands right now, with my back the way it is, I mean, what's the point if I can't even drive around without being in an immense amount of pain? And like the pain is it consumes me so much that it's so intense that I can't think of anything else when I'm driving. It's just I just have to sit there and constantly shift in my seat trying to get comfortable, and it's just not worth it, So I got to figure out a solution to that. So I think I think being, if I can change it to where I'm just like maybe like I'm truck camping in a town, like if I was in Lake City, the lot that's outside of town is like 3 or 4 miles outside of town, and it would be great just to kind of have more of a laid back schedule to where run to town, go to the coffee shop, grab some food, come back up to the lot where that's above Lake San Cristobal, maybe go fishing, work on some content, and then help out my family with getting some cabins up there. And I think that's the route I want to go.
Yeah, that's interesting, man. There's a heck of a lot right there that I wanna unpack a little bit. Stepping back, I've always admired your presence online, and you've had a number of different activities, and you're always, from my vantage point, you're always kicking ass online. You're always doing interesting things. You present it in an interesting way, and you always present a lot of creativity. But on the back end, you and I have gotten to know each other a little bit, and you've expressed in more detail some of the challenges that you had. So I admire your public persona and the way that you kick ass, but I also really do admire the way that you confront your challenges. And you, even right now, I think it's just generally, you're a very, very positive person. You're a very positive, focused person, but I do know that you have a process that you go through when you confront these challenges. And so that's kind of what I want to slow you down, because you went from my back is totally crushing me as far as the pain concerned. Mm-hmm. And then you posited this awesome new vision. And I guess I really want to better understand what is your thought process? How do you, like, what's it like when you're experiencing that pain in the moment? And then what's the process that you go through on a micro level that allows you to shift from, that debilitating, really destructive pain and frustration to getting these new ideas and these new visions that allow you to, come up with, the next new, cool, awesome, fucking kick-ass thing. Like, how do you do that? Because I mean, to be honest with you, like, I'm a lot more sluggish. I run into my own milestone. We talked about it with my foot. Mm-hmm. My foot blows up, and like, I really actually, I fall into a depression, and I'm not saying that I'm the, like, like never ending, I'm going to fucking kill myself. But
Uh-huh.
I get into that headspace of just like, my life is over.
Yeah, like woe is
And I
me.
don't,
Yeah.
yeah. And I know that you experience your own challenge,
Hmm.
but you really do a pretty remarkable job in slingshotting into a new vision. So tell me about that. Like, what's it like when you're experiencing that? Holy shit!
Hmm.
All my plans are fucked.
Yeah.
To, the redirection. What?
Yeah.
Tell me about that process.
Well, you know how it is when we truck camp. A lot of times we're alone, and we've touched on it before about when we're out here. Uh, you're alone with your thoughts, and it's been an excellent exercise for me over the last 3.5 years to master my thoughts and not let the negative thoughts or the discouragement run wild because it can, and I think that it's easy to allow oneself to fall into that. I've done it in the past, and when I did that in the past, I didn't like where I felt like I had no options left. And so what I do is when I experience a challenge like this, obviously I was pissed off that my back was. I'm just mad about it. I'll be in the backcountry and be like, fuck this shit. God damn it, my back hurts and this sucks. And why is this happening? And all this stuff. And kind of like shake my fist at the sky. And that's just me kind of getting out my frustration. But I do it to myself in the sense that I go so hard that when I stop, it's because I physically have to stop because I can't go any further. And that's my own problem. And I have to realize, and I've come to this realization, especially over the past year. Like I have to realize, like it's okay for me to slow down a little bit, and I don't have to keep running at a rabbit's pace. And I think the reason why I've been programmed like that, and the reason why I act like that, is because I have anxiety. And a lot of times, I think like um, I need to be productive in life in order to feel like that I have some sort of self worth. But that's not a realistic perspective that I have, because other people, like I've got friends that say, Brian, I love being around you, and like you said, like you're positive and all that stuff. And so I think I need to take it easier on myself. And when I went through this back stuff and then the other challenges that I had this summer, I was pretty bummed about it for a while. I never really communicated it to anybody, and I'm the type of individual, and I think a lot of people are programmed this way, to where if you get bummed out about something, you kind of keep it to yourself and try to work through it yourself, because I don't want to burden anybody else with my issues. And so what I do is I try to look at the silver lining in every situation, and I will get upset initially, and I've gone off on people before, and when things go south, and if someone comes over, and my Achilles heel in life tends to be that I trust people too much, and then I can get burned, and when I get burned, I get super pissed about it. But then once I get
Hmm.
over it, then I'm able to step back from the situation. It takes me about a week or so to get over that. I can step back from the situation and go, okay, how can I take this negative and turn it into a positive for myself? And that's an exercise that I've been doing over and over in the backcountry, living the way that both you and I live, with truck camping full time. And it's been a great learning experience for me, because when I was in the corporate world, what I would do is I'd just work more, and then I'd make more money, and money had a way of solving a lot of issues that it's a great distraction. When you got tons of cash, you can afford to do whatever you want, and then life doesn't seem like it's such a challenge. But with truck camping, like we've been doing, as you know, it's much more difficult to make a steady income. And so what I did was I found solace going out in nature, and I would get upset and I'd just be like, I got to go on a hike, and surprisingly enough, that when I do those things and I'm more active, my back tends to not feel as bad. It's when I'm driving or doing things like that, or doing the trail work, obviously, that's when my back would really, really give me problems. And then I wouldn't sleep at night. So that kind of wrecked me. So I think that this past year has been a really great lesson for me to analyze my life and realize, number one, I'm not getting any younger. I mean, I'm 43, it's 43 and a half. I'll be 44 in April. Uh, and that I don't necessarily, although I love to do the trail work on public lands, I don't have to do it. There's other people that can step up to the plate and do it. So I have a tendency sometimes to be stubborn and get locked in on things. And this summer I've been more mindful of that, to where it's like, hey, that's not working. It's time to change gears. It's time to go in a different direction. And so when these problems presented themselves, I just kind of put it out to people that were around me, like, hey, like to you, hey, I'm not gonna be able to stay at the off-grid cabin up by Granite, Colorado this winter because I can't load the boiler because my back is jacked. And you said, hey, well, I've got my buddy over in Gunnison has this place, and it's like, cool. So that option came available, and then I think that by sharing where I was at that time, it brought in all this great chances for different opportunities. And then, when I was talking to my uncles and talking to my Uncle Chris about it, he mentioned that stuff in Lake City. And I thought, oh, that's perfect. That's an area of Colorado that I've not spent a lot of time in. I would love to be down there. It's got incredible terrain. There's not very many people. Of course, the summertime, they do get the crowd from New Mexico and Texas because it's a straight shot up to that area of Colorado from lots of places in Texas and New Mexico. So there's a little bit of that crowd, but spring and fall and winter out there's not much, and there's no ski.
Yeah, let me. I'm just going to break in there, Brad, because you said it was. What's fascinating to me is that you talked about not wanting to burden others, and I can fully relate to that, and I often I prevent myself from reaching out to others for that very reason. And I want to pull myself up by the bootstraps and be able to kind of be, my own island and show everybody that I can do it myself. But then it's almost like you just contradicted yourself, because you said you have a tendency to share with a select few people about some of your challenges and how you need to find a different solution to whatever you're going through. And then things do just I don't want to say naturally, but solutions present themselves to you.
Yeah.
You talked about your challenge with me, that you can't go forward with this certain work that you wanted to do. And I just happened to have, a new opportunity that fell into my lap. And then again, you have that experience with your uncle where you're like, I need to change course a little bit. And then something, just comes to his mind. And I think that that's a really fascinating process. And again, I compare that to my inclination to, I don't want to share with anybody that shit's going down with me.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
So I naturally, I reached that point where shit just kind of explodes inside of me. And maybe they go a little bit too far in the impact that they have on me. And I contrast that to you, where you seem to be a little bit more willing to, maybe you're pretty selective in who you share things with, but you do have that group of people that you share things with, and then solutions present themselves. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, I think you're right. You nailed it on the head, or you hit the nail on the head in the fact that I do have a select group of people that I share stuff with, certainly my family. And then obviously you, and then I've got a couple other friends that I share stuff with, but I'm definitely guarded when it comes to, I would say, putting my challenges out there for the entire public consumption. And it's something that I want to get better at, because I don't want people to look at me and say, well, Brian's got it all together and he's perfect, and look at his awesome life and all those things, because he's got it all figured out.
And that's all I think.
Yeah.
I just go
really?
around skipping, and I'm just like, Brian's got it all together. I know that dude doesn't have any problem. Dude,
I'm like flying by the seat of my pants hour by hour. I mean, and that's no joke. so like but what I do have in my mind is, how I love marketing, and I think it's fascinating, just to not so much in the business sense, but just in general. I think it's cool to be able to generate a buzz out of nothing, and I get a ton of excitement from that, and it feeds my soul in a way that gives me energy to look for new opportunities. And I've come to this realization living this way. It's like, this is the only shot I've got at life, and there's a bunch of stuff I want to see. And the inside of an office for the 40 years isn't one of them. And so like I said, I'm pretty guarded with stuff, but I want to open that up a little bit more and let people into the real challenges that go on a day-to-day basis, as opposed to just every once in a while Brian might have a bad day. Well, Brian, I could have a bad day every day for a week, but people wouldn't know it because I keep it to myself. And I think if I was better at communicating that, I think that people would get um, I don't know if they would get encouraged or inspired or just feel like they're not alone. But I want people to know that even though on the surface everything looks awesome, it's still real life for me. And I have been burned in the past with giving out information to a wider group of people. So you're right. I do have just a very small select group of people that I trust and that I feel like I can say things to about what's really going on in my life, and then they'll. It just seems like it works, and maybe that's a life lesson that I need to dive into more and be more open with people and see what additional good things could come my way, because it does seem like when I share any sort of challenge that I may be having with my immediate group, there are these solutions or opportunities that come up that I never even thought would exist, and that happens on a regular basis when I'm able to open up. So,
Yeah, I find that fascinating because it's not so much that I am inspired by a bunch of the different things that you do and what have you, but I also there's also something that I just take away from the example of your willingness to be vulnerable. So you and I have had some deeper conversations, and probably this audience just thinks that we do talk deep, but whatever.
mm-hmm.
But your example of being willing to be vulnerable about the challenges that you're going through are just that for me. That they're an example, and it gives permission to me to also express some deeper truths and realities about what I'm going through. So
Mm-hmm.
It's not so much that I'm inspired, but I feel like it sets the right example that, and that there's an energy that flows through the conversation where I'm like, oh, okay, like here it is that I thought Brian was this way, and that shit just naturally fell in his lap, and he makes, everything that he touches is gold. But, by your willingness to be like, I'm pissed off that my truck keeps on falling apart. I'm pissed off that my back is fucked up. There's strength, I think, that I get and from your willingness to express that. And anyway, I mean, and that's a whole area I think that I'm really interested in exploring in this podcast in general. And as we go forward, and I welcome you to, kind of pick my brain on it. And I'm certainly interested in talking to Darren and others that we encounter in this podcast. Like, there really is, like, there's like strength comes out of weakness. It's a weird thing, right?
Yep, absolutely.
When we're willing to express our vulnerability and expose our vulnerability, there's a weird strength that comes out of it. And I'm actually even interested in hearing you describe, like, did you really get burned from? Have you ever really gotten burned from being vulnerable? Like, I know that you've gotten burned, like, in trusting others, but have you ever really gotten burned from being willing to be vulnerable?
No, it seems like every time that I open up and like I said, I internalize any issue that I'm going through, but then I'll get to a point where I'm like, I got to either talk about this or I'm going to go beat the crap out of someone, which I don't ever want to do. And so, and so it's like, okay, I'm going to talk about this. And when I do, good things happen. And I think that more people, I hope that people can look at that, or the people that are listening right now can say like, well, maybe I should open up a little bit about what I'm going through, because it's like, social media is such a fake, and a lot of people know this, but it is so fake in the sense that some of the people that I've met online that, have like these personas where everything is grand, and then I go and meet them in person, and this isn't always the case, but sometimes it's the case. It's like they're pretty troubled individuals. And I think they're looking for inspiration, and they're looking for a way to possibly process their challenges in a way that's healthy. And when you put on this front online like everything's cool, it's like you kind of almost get to the point to where it's like, well, all my stuff's kind of bullshit. And all I'm doing is putting out all the happy-go-lucky stuff, like when you and I were talking at the house, and I told you about how I was addicted to prescription pills for 4 years. I mean, no one knows that, and that's something that I've wanted to talk about for a long time. Is that when I was in the corporate world, I got so stressed out to where I couldn't sleep. Well, doctors were giving me Ambien, and they're giving me Xanax, and they're giving me Klonopin, and I got hooked. And it's like a lot of people are afraid to talk about that, but I found that after I went through that, and then I just finally one day I'm like, I'm not taking this shit anymore, and I quit taking it, and that was tough. It was like 6 months of withdrawals. I told you about how I threw up like every day, and I found after that I'm like, you know what? I'm a lot tougher, and I can put up with a lot more than I thought I could. I'm a lot stronger than I thought I was because I had challenges before that, not with prescription pills or anything, but just with life. You'd have situations that come up and you think, oh my gosh, that's horrible. I can tell you something. Nothing is more horrible than detoxing from prescription pills or any sort of drug. I mean, that sucks. And when you realize that your life is being controlled by a substance and that you don't have control over your own life, like that's tough to come to terms with, especially in my situation to where I always felt like I was on top of my game. But a really positive thing came from that in the sense that up until that point, when I kind of had my breakdown, I was back in like 2010. Up until that point, I had immense pressure on me that I kind of placed on myself, but I also would hear it from others. Like people say, "Man, you always do everything great, and everything always seems to work out for you, and you're successful in all these different areas, and everything's great." And I'm like, I just wanted, I didn't want people to hold me up on a pedestal like that. It got to the point to where it was a burden. And then once I, for the lack of a better word, once I stumbled, it was a relief because I could exhale because I'm like, all right, cool. The eyes aren't on me anymore. Nobody's looking at me anymore. I can figure out what I want in life because I didn't get to this point by being happy. I got to this point because something's wrong. So I need to figure out the way to go going forward. That's going to be better for my overall psyche. And then that way, if I'm a better person, I can give more back to the world. And so going through that experience for me was the biggest eye opener that when you're vulnerable, good things can happen in your life that comes from a really crappy situation. Good things can happen. And I need to be more open to that, going forward because I still am somewhat guarded when things go south in my life. I don't want to, like I said, I don't want to burden my friends with problems, but we all have problems. And I think the more that you talk about it, you realize that you're not alone. And it's just I don't know. Life has been interesting. I certainly didn't anticipate my life to go in this direction, but I'm glad that it has because I feel like it set me on a path of rediscovery for my own self to where I'm like, okay, that previous Brian was Brian version 1.0. Well, this is Brian version 2.0, and I'm still figuring out Brian version 2.0. But I'm much happier in my headspace. I'm much happier than I was before because I just felt like I was living a lie. It was like this big facade that I was this awesome sales guy and I was happy in life and everything. I didn't believe in any of that stuff. And so now I feel like I have the belief system in place to where it's like I believe in what I'm doing, and I believe that our messages and that our message through the podcast, and then just living like a minimalist and living life with true intention and purpose is much more powerful than all the money I could ever make.
And man, that's I'm going to interrupt there
okay.
because because I'm rude.
No, that's cool, dude.
No, I mean, number one, I really appreciate you being willing to expose yourself right there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and one thought that I've got is I want to challenge you on something you said. One thing you said was that you went through your challenge with the prescription medications,
mm-hmm.
and then there was something to the effect that you found that you were stronger than you thought you were by being able to get to the other side. And you and I have talked about this before, and I'm challenging you in that particular statement because what I heard you say before was that you were able to rely on the strength of your parents.
Yep.
And you were able to rely on the strength of some other people during that period of time mm-hmm. that they bolstered you up. And that's kind of where I need to hear that message because again, I believe that I should be strong enough to handle anything.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is is that I'm not strong enough, and when I'm willing to reach out to others for help in a time of need, I get the strength that I need. So it's not that I'm not, we aren't our own island, right?
Mm-hmm.
We gain strength from those that we're willing to be vulnerable from. And no one, it seems like there's this myth out there. And when I listen to Tim Ferriss, when I listen to Joe Rogan, I'm like, those fuckers, like they're fucking, they're gods, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like nothing ever seems to get in their way where they stumble and fall flat on their face, and they need the help from other people. But the reality is that I think this is where I think it's a really interesting conversation theme for us to have as we go forward. The reality is we all fall flat on our face.
Yeah.
And we all need to rely on others. And then the other thing that you really talked about in your last little stretch right there was you do see how going through that pain, going through that struggle, it actually empowers you to help people all the more.
Mm-hmm.
And you also see that living, like going for a less than conventional, a more unconventional way of life in what we're doing in pickup truck camping, backcountry, adventuring, just not this traditional, working for the man and doing the 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, whatever, that there's something in that way of life that allows at least people like you and I to attack this problem in a different way. And when I say this problem, I mean, for me at least, I get to attack the myth that all of us do this, all of us are supposed to do this on our own.
Yeah.
But the reality is that, like, I can't do all this alone. I need to rely on friends who've got space, and those things seem to just fall in my lap when I'm willing to be open about them. So anyway, I just wanted to stop you there because, again, you're saying so much, and well, I'm just grateful that you're saying it. And I've got my own struggles with addiction and what have you, and I'll get into that at a later point, maybe another podcast where, the fact of the matter is I've got my own, I've got my own default ways of handling things and viewing things. I now know that they're wrong. So I need to rewire everything and try things a different way. And again, looking at you as an example of being willing to talk about it, it allows me to be like, well, fuck, if Brian's able to talk about shit in the bed, like maybe I should talk about shit in the bed, you know? And maybe it gives you strength, and maybe out there too, I'm hoping that people are listening to this are like, fuck yeah. Like, like not all of us are fucking Joe Rogan and Tim Ferriss's. And Tim Ferriss has been willing to talk about his issues, and God bless him. But I think the fact of the matter is still like everybody wants to be a rock star and looks like a rock star, but like fucking A, I'm definitely not a rock star, and gosh darn it, I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Well, I think that, I think also too, anything that has to do with any sort of mental hiccup is frowned upon in this country. Like we were talking, especially in the corporate world, you better have your shit together, or at least have the perception or presence that you have your shit together, because if you don't, you won't get anywhere. And the thing is like, no one's perfect. And as far as our brains go, like if you break your leg, people won't, okay, well, you get better. But if you have a mental lapse, everybody's, it's looked at as like taboo. But that's like, I don't know. I think that, but the reason why my stuff started was because, I couldn't sleep in the corporate world. So I got on Ambien. Well, that's a slippery slope. And then, you have any drinks on top of that. Next thing you know, you don't even know what you're doing. And then that doesn't work anymore, so they switched me to Xanax, which that's dangerous. And then I got on Klonopin, and then I got to the point to where I didn't even know how much I'd take, because it's like a mind eraser. You take one in the morning, take a pill in the morning, and then you think, did I take a pill? And then you take another one, and next thing you know, you're 5 deep throughout the day, and you don't know what you're saying. And that's a slippery slope. And I never anticipated my life to go in that direction, but that was a direct byproduct of me trying to make a square peg fit in a round hole in the corporate world, and that was a wake up call for me, because if that wouldn't have happened, who knows where I would have been? I could have died in my sleep. I could have died. I could have died from, like the respiratory failure that you hear about. Somebody takes an Ambien, has a glass of wine, they never wake up. That could have been me 20 times, 100 times over. And it was interesting when I was going through my stuff, when I finally just told people, I'm like, I have a problem. And everybody's like, yeah, we know. And I thought that I was keeping it under wraps, but like the people close to me knew what was up. And they were real concerned about everything. And I thought, mistakenly, that if I told people about my problems, that everybody would be like, well, Brian's a loser and I'm not going to talk to him anymore. And it was the exact opposite. Now, I did have some friends, or who I thought were friends, that just kind of were like, and kind of just like put me at arm's length and said, well, Brian's fucked up and I don't want to talk to him anymore. But that wasn't very that wasn't common. The more common and the overriding theme was, hey, Brian, we just want the best for you. And I think people put too much stock into worrying about what other people think, and as a result of it, people can suffer because they won't expose themselves to what's going on, and I suffered greatly because of it. And looking back on it, it was so inspiring to me, the people that just came out of the woodwork. I mean, people that I hadn't talked to in a while, like people I grew up with, and also some really close friends of mine out in California when I was going through this stuff. I mean, they came to my aid, and I was just like, holy shit, I do have a lot of people that care about me. Because I kind of thought like, well, I've got a lot of friends, but I don't know who's like true friends. And I had a lot more true friends than I thought. And then also too with my parents, I called them up and said, hey, I've got this problem. I need to come back to Kansas because I've been trying to kick this on my own. And when I get to the point where withdrawals are real bad, I can't take care of myself, and I need to have somebody there for me that can make those tough decisions and make sure that I'm eating properly. Because health, I mean, nutrition is so key. If anybody's dealing with any sort of mental challenges, if you get your nutrition on point and make sure that you're really dialed in with good nutrition, that's going to go a long ways to helping alleviate or improve, any situation that you're going through. And so I learned a lot about just taking care of myself, because I got to the point in the corporate world where I would just go, wasn't eating that great, wasn't working out the way I should. And then like happy hour was every night, because, you want to kind of numb the dullness or the gray from that life. And so, once I made my problems known, it's like life started to fall into place the way that I wanted it to, not the way that the corporate structure wanted me to, or wanted it to. It's like that was no longer dictating my direction in life. I was in control of my life now. And it's super empowering when you go through something like that, because like I was saying, it's definitely by far the toughest thing I've ever had to deal with. So that makes the problems now seem less challenging. It's not as difficult. It doesn't seem so insurmountable as it did before. Whereas prior to going through those challenges, when like if something would come up at work, like, hey, you're up for this promotion and or whatever, but make sure you do everything right. And I'd be like, oh shit, I got to make sure that my life is perfect and I'm dialed in and all that stuff. And I would think the world was on the brink of coming to an end. But that's nothing compared to you're on day 5 of not sleeping because you're not taking pills because you want to get your life back in order. And you're throwing up all the time and you can't think straight and you're hallucinating. And like my mom told me at one point that I told her, and I don't remember saying this, but that I told her that I was sitting on my bed and I was having like a really bad day. And I told her that there were people standing around me with their heads cut off and they were holding them in their hands. Now that's fucked up.
Jesus.
Yeah. And I mean, that's what pills do to people. And not everyone experiences that with pills, but it's like not everybody, we're all programmed differently. And so this weird, in my opinion, this weird assumption that one pill fits all, like this one size fits all things. It's like everybody's different. It's going to affect them different. And that stuff definitely took me down. But realizing how far down I was, because when I had the moment of clarity, I'm like, I got to get this stuff out of my system. And I kept on telling myself, like every day I felt shitty. I was like, it's got to get better eventually. Like I wasn't born like this. I wasn't born feeling this horrible. So it has to get better eventually. But like I got to the point to where I would take showers and I couldn't even feel the temperature on my skin. It could be ice cold or blazing hot. And I couldn't feel the temperature because like my body was that jacked from all the stuff that I had in my
Well,
system. Yeah.
I want to ask you. I want to ask you a question about that. Not the cold thing, but the you talked about the self talk
Mm-hmm.
that I've got to get better. I know that I haven't always been like this,
Mm-hmm.
and things can get better. It would is it accurate to say that actually was like a voice that came from inside of you, or do you think that it's encouragement that you got from other people that was the source of that? And the reason why I asked is because for my own situation, I I don't have that kind of self talk.
Mm-hmm.
That that kind of self talk is something that I'm working on now, and it actually I could point to specific people in my life that essentially have held me up by saying that. I mean, it sounds corny and all this shit, but like the Stuart Smalley stuff, like you're good enough and you're smart enough, and
Yeah.
gosh darn it, people like you. Like
Yeah.
I shit you not. Like I've actually had the people in my life who have told me that, and initially I'm like, you're full of shit. Like you don't know anything about me, and the misery that I live in. But the truth of it is that through their regular supporting me in that way and saying things like that, and directing me to resources and what have you that reinforce those messages,
Mm-hmm.
I've started to now learn how to use that kind of self-talk. So I'm interested if that kind of self-talk is native to you, that's phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
But my experience with it is like that's actually something that I first gathered from other people, and I'm having to kind of rework that self-talk into my own
Yeah.
shit narrative.
Well, I think I benefited greatly from having such incredible parents and such an incredible family. My brothers, I mean, my brothers are my best friends, and then my parents. I mean, I just I just feel extremely fortunate to have them in my life because my mom has always been a good compass for me, and I think to myself like when I'm going through different challenges in life or whatever, it's like I think about my behavior and the way I act about stuff, and I think like, would my mom be proud of my actions right now? And so that's a uh, really good compass for me, and it's a way for me to gauge where I'm at. And if my answer is no, then it's like I need to make the changes accordingly. And it's not that I'm a mama's boy or anything like that. It's just that my mom has had a huge influence in my life, as well as my dad, and like I said, my brothers as well. And so I, I actually had that voice that was internal that said, "Hey, Brian, like time to get this under control, and it's time to move on." Because I realized fully I could die from it, you know, and because it was getting to a point where it was getting out of hand, and I thought, this can't continue. And then, like I said, once I opened up, and it was it was kind of an eye opener to me. I'm like, "Hey, I'm having this problem," and everybody's like, "Yeah, we know." And I thought that I had them all fooled, but that's not reality. And that's true. Also, that's the drug of choice or whatever it is that, if anybody else out there is experiencing something like that, it's like that blinds you from the reality that's going on. And I just thought, I'm like, I just want my life back. Like I don't want to have it to where if I don't take a pill I get sick, or I'm a slave to this stuff. Because I remember I had an opportunity to go backpacking in a really killer area of Mexico. This was back when Tijuana and all those places were safe, and I had an opportunity to go, and I thought, I can't go because my prescription is coming up for a refill, and if I'm out there in nature, I'll get sick, and I don't want to do that. So it's like,
Wow.
I would never say no to an opportunity like that because I love it. I
Wow.
would love, and
Yeah, that's really telling right there.
yeah.
I think that's really really telling. And to bring it back to, our current goals and vision and lifestyle, I can't reiterate enough, and maybe it's been part of my own process and recovery or whatever you want to say. Like so I have learned that being vulnerable and being willing to say that I can't do it, I need help.
Mm-hmm. It's tough to do. So that's a tough thing to say.
It is, but I guess so I look at you, and it seems as though you've taken that process of reaching that challenge and through the series of decades and years and decades, mm-hmm. that you were climbing the corporate ladder, mm-hmm. you were kicking ass, but you weren't getting better, right? It was almost as though you were getting worse. And you were getting more anxious and more angry. Yep. And so you reached that point where you're like, this isn't working, and I need to straighten my shit out, and then I need help. And then I don't want to put words into your experience or redescribe what isn't true for you, but I can say it for myself, where I've learned that reaching that point where this is no longer working. Yeah. I need help. I need to go a different way. And I'm actually now, okay, so I dug myself out of that hole, that shithole, and now I'm on this new pathway or whatever. I feel like I've got license to use that approach to, a conventional lifestyle versus an unconventional one, right? Like, mm-hmm. So now that I'm out of the shithole and I'm out of that trouble, I get to question that way of life and apply those same tools that got out of that shithole, but I get to apply it to this new cool way of life, right? Like, so, mm-hmm. Well, maybe I don't need a 9-to-5 job and, settling down in the suburbs with a townhome and a kid. And if that's your thing, that's awesome. But for me, it's not. Yeah. I get to apply that same thought process and that same set of tools that worked when I was in the shithole. I get to apply it now, where I'm like, well, maybe I can try something different. Maybe I can go live in this new way, and I can, like you, talk about the challenges on a regular basis with the people that I trust and care about me and have my best interest in mind. And these new solutions are going to pop in my way to allow me to further investigate this pathway, which in a way is there's this intuitive compass, this internal compass that's guiding me in a different way. And I get to have faith in that process that, hey, it worked before. Mm-hmm. Maybe it gets to work in this way of life. And it's not something that I only need to rely on when the shit hits the fan, right? Yeah, I get to rely on it when things are going good and maybe I run into an obstacle. Well, I'll talk about with Brian because he understands the way that my mind works and naturally family and what have you. And maybe the bulk of society has figured out this is the way to live all along, but I know I haven't. This is like a whole new world for me to, listen to my internal compass, and I get to redirect. And even though it might not sound like the conventional solution, that who the fuck cares, right? If it works for me, it works for me.
Yeah, totally. Well, and that's kind of what I came to the realization of as well, is that, okay, after I, got my head straight and all that stuff, I thought, if I go back to the corporate world, I'm just going to end up right in that same spot again. Maybe not on the prescription pill side, but definitely the not sleeping and the anxiety and the feeling of I always have to prove myself to others in order to have like self-worth. And a lot of that is just that public reaffirmation of like, whatever I was doing at the time. And so it's been interesting. It's been such a great lesson. And I'm actually thankful that I went through all that stuff, because I feel like it's given me much more perspective on life to be in a position to where I can communicate my challenges to others. And I'm glad to have this forum to do it and let people know, like, okay, just because you're going through problems those problems don't define you. It's what you do with that is what defines you. And because I told people when I was going through that stuff, I was like, I don't want to be labeled like a druggie, or I don't want to be labeled an
Right.
addict, all that stuff. And the thing is nobody wakes up in the morning and says, hey, I'm going to start smoking crack today, or hey, I'm going to start taking a bunch of pills. There's a pain that, you know what I mean? There's like some sort of,
Yeah.
there's some pain that they're trying to diminish. And lots of times you do it through self-medication. I mean, how many people drink too much every day? There's a lot. And I see it on social media all the time. Hey, it's wine every night, wine, wine, wine. I'm like thinking, okay, 3 or 4 glasses of wine a night every night, like that's an issue. And people need to be cognizant of that. It's like I don't want to have my life be diminished, and I don't want to look back and go, man, I can't get those years back, because those 4 years that I was jacked, I would say the first 3 I was okay, but the last one I wasn't. And it's like I wish I had that time back, and I don't ever want to be in that spot again to where I wish I had time back due to some maladaptive behavior or some way I process life that isn't healthy. And I went through a good counseling session. I had this guy I told you about him, that old police chief, and I was a bullshitter back when I was going through my issues, because you want to lie about it. You just lie about it. You know what I mean? Everything's
Yeah.
fine, and it's like you're lying to get through the next day or the next prescription or whatever it may be. And I walked in there and I actually got a DUI when I was in California. I was on pills, and it was like a Saturday afternoon. I was coming back from my friend Jason Sloan's house, and I had one beer, but that one beer that I had made me drive all funny, and I didn't realize it. And I had a cop that pulled me over, and I got a DUI from it. And that was like really the tipping point of like okay, that doesn't happen if everything's going good in your life. If you get a DUI, like there's a problem. You shouldn't be doing that. And so that was a great self check, and I just want people to know that if they're going through stuff, it's okay. Like, talk to your friends and family, and you'd be surprised how many people are willing to offer support, and you'd also be surprised how many people know what's going on. Like, I think a lot of people kid themselves into thinking like, hey, I've got all of my demons like in the closet and no one knows about them. That's not true, and especially when you're not in the right state of mind like I was. So well, go ahead.
No, I was just agreeing with you, and I guess, like, again, taking it to your present circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
Like I really do see a thread between the challenge that you've had in the past and the process you went through to get out of it. And so now here I am, and here we are, the audience, observing you go through a challenge. You've got these back issues.
Mm-hmm.
You had these plans to do X, Y, and Z, but the back issue is throwing this all to shit, right? And so, if I went through that in my prior life, the reaction that I would have had would have been more destructive than the actual event, right?
Mm-hmm.
But here I am. Here we are watching you. So you're going through this pain, and not only is it physical pain, but there's got to be some emotional pain where, like, oh gosh, I had these plans,
mm-hmm.
and now I've got to change them again, and this frustration. But there's almost like this fluid response where you are able to check yourself in what really is and what really isn't.
Yeah.
Like, okay, so you've got a setback. You've got your support network that you get to turn to, and whether that, I hope that I'm considered part of that support network. But I know you've got your family as well.
100%.
You get to talk about these things, and then whether they're coming from you or elsewhere, it doesn't really matter, right?
Mm-hmm.
Solutions are starting to percolate up, and you get to come up with a new vision. And from my perspective, I mean, that's what winning is all about. And that's like whether any of these new visions for you
mm-hmm.
Actually come to fruition. And I think they will in some form or another. But for me, observing you and the example that you're setting, the winning is actually taking taking on this challenge, experiencing the challenge that you are, and you're not being a victim to it, right? You're just reacting to it in a way that you've learned how to react to challenges in a healthy way.
Yeah.
And that's fucking winning right there.
I totally agree. And and like you said, in the previous, before I had these issues, like when I had the course correction in my life, I would think like, oh my gosh, if I lost my job, my life would be over. Well, it's not. I mean, that's not reality, and I think that living like I have over the last 3.5 years in my truck and just going in all these different areas, it forced me to be more flexible in life and forced me to say like, okay, well, that's not working. I need to go in this direction. And it's like literally like you just choose a different road to go down. And it's like figuratively and literally, like that's the way I live my life now. And it's a really freeing place to be in because I don't let those issues dominate my mind or dictate how my future is going to go. It's like I realize that I'm in control of my future. And I think that the combination of living like this and being mobile and having the freedom associated with truck camping, and then also the inspiration that I derive from the backcountry, it's like all these incredible things have come my way that I never thought about. Like just recently being able to work with Merrill in the wilderness area, and they're going to launch a new product around. They got a new boot that they're going to launch next year based on this. I would have never anticipated that to happen ever. If you would have ever guessed, if you said, Brian, you think that'll ever happen? I'd say 100% no. But it's like, you follow your heart and you open yourself up and you really work on yourself to where, at least in my situation, I worked on myself to where it's like, okay, I want to get in a healthy mind, space in my head. And then I want to live life with intent and purpose. And I want to live it pure. I don't want to live it in an altered state of mind. It's like all these things just started to unfold. It's like life started to unfold the way that I've always hoped that it would. And I always told myself too, like I was mentioning previously, that I didn't want any of my challenges with the pills or the anxiety or the mental lapses that I had. I didn't want that to define me. I used that as a tool to reshape my future and reshape my perspective. And it's been a long process. I mean, heck, like I said, that was in 2010. It's 2018. Like it doesn't happen overnight. And of course, when you're going through that situation, you wish it would happen overnight, but that's not reality. And I think the time that it took to get to where I'm at now just makes me that more appreciative of the struggle. Because without that struggle, I would have never gone in this direction. I would have never met you. I would have never met a lot of the friends that I have now, who I consider to be super solid people. I mean, you're one of the best guys I know. Other people that I've met that live the mobile life, it's like they're living with purpose and they're living with intent. They're not like, oh, I'm a salesperson. Like that was my thing. Oh, I'm a salesperson. I do this. I do that. Who cares? I mean, like that's great if you're passionate about it, but I wasn't. So it really had no meaning to me. And so now it's like my life, it's like I love truck camping. I love talking about it. I love talking about nature. I love talking about conservation. All these things that I never in a million years thought I would get into, I'm into and I love it. And it's all from having that course correction from a huge challenge that I experienced. And I just hope.
That's awesome, Brian. And I know we're probably at the
we're getting close,
somewhat the limit, but I'm gonna So I'll wrap this up. And here's what, and I'm going to tie it back into my beginning call to action for our audience. Is I am interested in hearing, what people want out of this podcast. But what we're talking about today is really what I see this podcast about, and that's here's my thesis. Here's my hypothesis: is that everybody who does awesome shit out there. Mm-hmm. My hypothesis is that it's likely somewhere in their past, either recent or further back, they had a challenge where, for lack of a better phrase, their life shit the bed.
Yep.
And they got the support that they needed, and there are those outliers out there, right? Who naturally hit that challenge and were able to spring out of it. But I think the common person runs into that challenge, their life falls apart, and they got the support that they need, and they recalibrated. They got a new set of processes to handle life, and maybe they slingshotted into a totally new, different way of life. Maybe they just have different exercises that they do, but that's the kind of thing I think is going to be really interesting to explore in this podcast as we go about in our own lives and experiencing challenges. How do we handle struggle? How do we handle failure? And maybe it's like, people say like, oh, don't use the word failure. It's only happy
if you're
mistakes or whatever. But but it's, like here I am watching you go through yet another struggle, and you're coming up with all these new solutions. And that, I think, is a really important thing. For me, that's worth exploring with every person. Yeah. And I love watching the ultra performers and essentially your He-Man or, whatever. But frankly, I think, the Tim Ferrisses and the Joe Rogans are already extracting what those people are doing and how they're doing it. And God bless them. I'm going to listen to them. Yep. But I think I really feel like we've got something to explore with, what are the rest of us doing, as we confront these challenges. And I'm definitely interested in those unconventional ways that people are now engaging life, as opposed to the more traditional, well, I'm gonna get the job, and I'm gonna have the family, and I'm gonna get the mortgage and a 401k, and if that's your thing, great. But I'm also really interested in learning and engaging more with those who have slingshot out of that into a different realm, and how their pain, their past pain, is showing the solution for them today.
Yeah, it's like their fuel for their new course correction. And that's what I look at it as. I look back at the person that was lost back in 2010. It started happening in 2007 and it ended in 2010. And I think I don't ever want to go back there. And that's fuel for me to live a purposeful life and a life of intent. And it just so happens that I just absolutely love being outside every second of every day. And so it's like I draw inspiration from that. And it's like I said, I never thought my life would go in this direction, but I couldn't be happier with it.
Right on. Well, I appreciate you being so open and honest this session, Brian, and I'll return the favor. I promise you get to interview me, and you can become Dr. Freud yourself on me.
Okay, sounds good, man.
To everybody out there, please send the feedback on what we're doing. And thanks to Brian, and we'll see y'all the next time.
Yeah, thanks. And everybody, if you want to message me directly with any comments or questions, it's Brian at ColoradoBackcountryAdventures.com. So, all right, Craig.
You can send Craig any messages to that too.
Yeah.
Right on, Brian.
All right, buddy.
Get that back feeling better. But either way, I'm looking forward to hearing about your next adventures.
Cool, man. I'll talk to you later, man.